You are listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
This network is supported by our listeners. You can become a supporting member by going to archpodnet.com/members and signing up. As a supporting member, you have access to high-quality downloads of each show and a discount at our future online store, and access to show hosts on a members-only Slack team. For professional members, we'll have training shows and other special content offered throughout the year. Once again, go to archpodnet.com/members to support the network and get some great extras and swag in the process. That's archpodnet.com/members.
Ancient tools and burials, plants and seeds, Neanderthal.
Welcome to the Archaeological Fantasies Podcast, episode 79. I'm your host, Sarah Head, with my co-hosts on vacation tonight. Today we're talking with Fernanda Maneses about the Easter Island statues, more commonly known as the Moai statues. We talk about the culture of the Moai statues, of the people that live on the island who created them, about the history of the statues, and we talk about the giant claw UFO that placed all of the statues all around the island. Get ready to think critically.
Funny bitty blokes you will see are a staple of archaeology. But we don't do dinosaurs. No, we don't do dinosaurs.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Archaeological Fantasies Podcast. I am your host, Sarah, and I am here by myself today, except for my wonderful guest host who is going to be with me. Fernanda, can you introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Hey, my name is Fernanda Maneses. I'm a Chilean archaeologist. I live in the other side of the world. I did my thesis on tobacco and archaeobotany and experimental archaeology, and by no means I'm an expert on the subject today, but still I'd love to talk about it.
And today we are going to be discussing the Easter Island statues, or the Moai as they're known. And Fernanda, you say you're not an expert, but we brought you on the show because you know quite a bit about them, don't you?
Yeah, we studied them here at the university in Chile. We had classes on them. And I went into being an volunteer in the Funk Museum here in Viña del Mar. And they have the largest collection of Rapa Nui archaeological items outside of the island. So, yeah, it was quite a topic there.
So, before we get too deep into this discussion, because of course it's Archae Fantasy, so we're going to talk about the ridiculousness behind the images of the Easter Island statues as they're used. But can you give us a little bit of background on what the Moai statues are and what Rapa Nui is, just for people who may not be familiar with those things?
Sure. Easter Island, or Tepito Tehenua, it's an island in the middle of the Pacific. It's approximately 3,600 kilometers or 22,000 miles from the coast of Chile. It has a volcanic origin, and it is mostly known for being the island in which the Rapa Nui culture was found in the 1700s. And basically, it went wildly famous when they not only discovered this island in the middle of nowhere that had people living on it, but also that these people had made a lot of statues, huge, enormous statues that they called Moai, and they were all over the island. So, yes.
and the Moai statues, for a long time, most people will know what we're talking about because we're talking about the giant stone heads that you see almost always in cartoons and stuff buried in the ground, or occasionally you'll get that really majestic picture of all of the statues all lined up and they're sitting on a big stone base, and they seem to be going from tallest to shortest. So those are real common images that we've seen. But you were saying that the statues weren't, or the Moai culture, not Moai, I'm sorry, the Rapa Nui culture wasn't even discovered until the 1700s, right?
Yes, it was discovered by Dutch sailors in the 1700s, and on Easter Day. So that's why the name was Easter Island. And Yeah, and mostly the first encounters were like really nice. Like Europeans got to the island, they got to meet the Indians who lived there. They made a few reports. They took a few Moais with them, and everything was kind of fine up until the 1800s, where Peruvian sailors, not the Navy, I want to establish that, Peruvian sailors sailed to the island looking, and they were slavers.
So these are Peruvian slavers who were
island.
looking for stuff.
Yeah, looking for bounty.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah, and it is kind of a tragic story because their culture was practically wiped out. In between, they got the slaves from the island, more than 1,000 slaves. They sent them to Peru, and after a few years, when finally slavery was abolished in Peru, they let them go back to Easter Island. These few survivors, but they got smallpox in Callao port. So when they got back to the island, they kind of wiped out the rest of the population. So up to the end of the 1800s, there were less or 110 survivors, like Rapa Nui survivors.
Now, but this doesn't mean that the Rapa Nui culture or the Rapa Nui people are gone. They're still a living people, correct?
Yes, they're still living people. They're a very thriving culture. They feel very proud of their traditions. They have a lot of different ceremonies on the island. They tend to teach a lot to the new generations, not only their language, but also the different myths of origin, the legends of the island, the history of the different chiefs that the island had. After the first chief arrived, which he's called Hotumotua, which was the first Tariki to arrive on the island. And they're very proud of that. And they're very proud people. And they sometimes get a bit, I think that they may feel sometimes invisible right next to the Moai. They are so huge in to the rest of the world. But yeah, they're living there, they're thriving there, and they're a very amazing culture.
Now, the statues themselves, and I think you've mentioned this, the statues themselves don't... What do the statues represent? Because that has been a debate for a long time, but you have mentioned what the statues themselves are supposed to represent to the Rapa Nui, right?
Well, the statues themselves are in the oral tradition of the Rapa Nui, and to them up to this day represent their ancestors. The statue is a representation of an ancestor, and it is erected on a stone platform called ahu. And these ahu are located in different parts on the island that have ceremonial meaning for their families. So the Moai, the stone Moai, it's a representation of an ancestor that it's looking towards the family land and protecting it and sacralizing it through their eyes.
So they're making it, they're using the statues to make the land sacred.
Exactly.
So now the statues, people are really familiar with the statues because they, as we'll discuss later, they're all over the place. They're a pretty popular pop culture symbol. They're used both inside and outside of the fringe. Most people may be familiar with the statues because they've seen a movie like Night at the Museum, or the most recent ones that I can think of with the big talking head that likes to chew on bubblegum. And I can't think of another movie where there's been a statue as a character. But a lot of times when we're shown these statues, they look very blocky, very rough, like there's not a lot of detail on them, or if there had been a lot of detail, it was scuffed off or something. But the statues themselves are actually, they're huge, and they're very detailed, are they not? Yeah.
Even though the statues themselves are made of Toba volcanic rock. It's an igneous kind of rock. And even though the main frame of the statue is kind of blocky, the statue itself may have a lot of different representations. Some of them present different designs, and those designs are a presentation of the tattoos that people have. So, of course, like for a foreigner, more so of these designs wouldn't have any meaning, but to the islanders, they did. And that's some of the reasons why the first representations of the Moai didn't have this type of designs. But they're all over the island. And they're very intricate and very precise.
So the statues are tattooed, and you're saying that the tattoos mean different things. Do we know what the different do we as archaeologists and people who are studying the culture, do we know what those tattoos mean? Or is that kind of like a lost language? Because the Rapa Nui also have a written language, do they not?
Yeah, they did. The truth is that if they did, I would probably have to consult some document because I actually can't remember. I know that most of the symbols that they use in their body had some sort of representations toward their family, but I'm not sure if it's part of the Rongo Rongo language that you're referring to. And the Rongo Rongo language, it's basically what we know as the only Polynesian written language, which is found on the Rapa Nui Rongo Rongo tablets, and it's very detailed, symbolic representations of different animals. You know that it's part of a very intricate written language, but regrettably, that knowledge was lost when the Peruvians took the slaves.
Oh wow, okay. Now, you're saying the Runga Runga tablets, and I know I said that wrong. But what are these tablets?
You're doing fine.
What are the Runga Runga tablets?
The Rongo Rongo tablets itself are wooden tablets with the representations of a lot of symbols that linguists have analyzed. I'm sorry,
Linguists.
My English.
That's all right, linguists.
Linguists have identified as a very complex written language. And it's, I don't know how to explain it precisely. It's an ideogram. They know that it's something that it's an idea that it's written, like a Maya type of hieroglyphic.
So it's a hieroglyphic kind of language. It's a hieroglyphic kind of language, but regrettably that's all lost. And the funny thing is that even though they're the only Polynesian culture that has it, they're I don't know if you know this, but in their oral tradition, they actually brought the tablets with them when they migrated from another island to Easter Island. They brought it with them. So in their oral tradition, the first chief, is he credited with bringing them with him, or was someone else credited with that?
No, someone else is credited with that. It doesn't have a specific name. It just says that they're like wise men that knew how to rid them.
Okay, and did these people come with the first chief?
Yes.
So this is something that, according to their oral tradition, they've had since their people were founded.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's
not
really
something
old
that
language.
Actually, that's one of the because of the huge discussion that has been going on over the last 50 years almost about how and when the island was populated. There has been a lot of analysis of glottochronology analysis. I don't know if you're okay. That it's that when linguists try to determine when language separated from their mother branch, etc., and they try to and they place the division of this language like really far, like at least 1,200 years ago.
Okay.
So that would be around 1800. I'm sorry, 800 after Christ. AD?
So 800 AD?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've lost the ability to translate this out because of the devastation that the smallpox and the slavery had on the population during the 1800s. Has there been much success in translating the language? Like recently? Like have they made any kind of inroads whatsoever?
No, I'm really sorry to say that they haven't. And it would be awesome. I mean, not only awesome, incredible for them as a culture to get that back, but sadly, no. There hasn't been any type of advance in that.
Okay.
That
Well,
I
that's
know.
unfortunate. It really is unfortunate that it's like but we're still working on it, but it's just unfortunate that we like lost all that information.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the Rapi Nui, we've talked about the Runga tablets, which is really actually kind of amazing that the wooden tablets themselves have lasted this long. How old is the wood that the tablets are on? Do we know? Because it's really weird.
Actually,
it's really rare for wood to last this long.
I don't know if the wood itself has been carbon dated, but taking into account that it could have lasted the last 200 years. Like, it's not necessarily like they didn't have to. Even though they say that they brought the tablets and language with them, I don't think it's viable to say that the tablets are 1,200 years old. Like, they could have copied them.
Right, exactly.
So,
but still having wooden artifacts.
Yeah, but there are so few of them. I don't know if they've been carbon dated. I know that there are really few of them. There are only, I think there's only one in continental Chile. Just so that you can have an idea. Like, there's only one. The rest of them are all replicas made in the last, 50 years. And so I'm not really sure that if they would get a permit to carbon date it. Like, you would have to break apart some part of it.
Right.
I'm not really sure that you would be able to do it.
And I could understand why they would be reluctant. Now, do the Rapa Nui themselves, they manage their own... do they keep track of their own cultural material on their island? Do they run their own museums or that kind of stuff? Or has most of their culture been appropriated by other cultures who are taking care of it in their own museums?
Yeah, well...
Quote,
one thing that you can kind of be sure is that has happened in the islands. Like, for the last few years, there's, like, I would say 20 to 15 years, there has been a lot of involvement of Rapa Nui archaeologists. But before that, the first person to study the island on a systematical archaeological point of view was Thor Heyerdahl. And he was a guy known for having this hyper-diffusionism theory of the population of Polynesia, not from Polynesia to America, but from America to Polynesia. And he built a huge, amazing, incredibly expensive Kon-Tiki ship and tried to sail and hit it. He almost died, but he did it. And so, yeah, you can say that about him. Like, he almost died, but he pulled it through.
Right, and you've mentioned that this is kind of he has kind of an interesting status among the scholars in that area simply because, he was the first person to bring attention to this archaeology, but at the same time, he's got some interesting ideas. And I know that Jeb has pointed out, because we've brought Thor Heyerdahl up before, and Jeb has pointed out that he's backed off on he appears to have backed off on his hyperdiffusionism opinions, but there's still, some hinky stuff out there that is not exactly mainstream as far as accepted theory that he clings to. But he did build the boat, and he did manage to get it from one coast to the other, but, he wrote a book about it, too, and I'll put the name of the book in the show notes for everybody, but it was an interesting challenge for him. Like, yeah, he did almost die, and at the same time, I don't think just because he was able to do it in the modern era that we can, say that was happening not in the modern era when we don't have ships that can come and rescue us when we start to drown and take on water.
Yeah.
Well, let's go to break real quick, and when we come back, we will start discussing some of the interesting theories that exist about the Moai statue. The
The CRM Archaeology podcast brings together a panel of cultural resource management professionals to discuss the issues that really matter to the profession. Find out about networking strategies, job hunting, graduate programs, and much more. We'll often feature interviews with college professors, CRM business owners, and experts as well. Check out the show on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/CRM Arc Podcast. Let's get back to the show.
Hey everyone, and we are back, and we are still talking about the Moai and the Easter, also known as the Easter Island statues. And Fernanda, you wanted to tell us about a theory about where the statues may have come from, and it might have to do with aliens.
Oh, yeah, sure. Of course. I know that you have seen that awesome show called Ancient Aliens on History Channel.
I've never
you
seen
may
that
get
show.
an idea.
Never seen it.
Ever heard of it?
And they, 11 years it's been on the air. Never watched it once. Anyway, yeah.
11 years. Oh my God. It's been 11
I know.
years.
I think it's longer than that, but I know it's been on at least, I think there's 10 seasons of it now. It's just ridiculous. It's like, oh God, really?
Oh my God. Wow. Time flies by.
Oh man, there's so much, and they just repeat themselves now. It's just the same stuff, just rehashed at this point. But they have offered several weird ideas about not only where the statues have come from, and of course they don't always agree with each other, but what the statues are supposed to represent as well. And it's almost always aliens, just, spoiler.
Yeah.
But so some of the theories behind the statues are that the rock is just far too hard to ever be carved by anything on Earth, and that we would have needed like lasers to carve this stone, and we have no idea how they could have possibly have lifted these stone things out of the ground. Therefore, aliens must have just planted them all. What's wrong with that?
Of course, you're gonna need a diamond point laser.
A diamond point laser.
Work that type of stuff. Yeah. Like, there's no other way. Well,
there's no other way in the world.
I hear that a lot in the world. Yeah, I actually hear that a lot. Like, I had like this, I must admit, tipsy discussions at parties where people always tend to say like, but dude, like, why is it so impossible to make? And I'm like, no. Like, I'm about to slap him and say, like, please don't say that again, ever. It's because a lot of people don't know, but the Moais are made from, like I said before, volcanic tufa. The island itself has a volcanic origin, so there are a lot of igneous rocks on the island. You have obsidian, you have a basalt, and also you have tufa. And from those three, tufa, it's kind of easy to work. Like, you can actually work it pretty easy. And they have found the axes. They have found there are a lot of, oh my God,
they're groundstone axes, aren't they? They've been made out of a harder material.
In the quarries. Yeah, and they have found the Moais in the quarries. They have found the axes in the quarries. They have found Moais, like, are not completely built in the quarry, but still, somehow, it's impossible to believe that all of that together can somehow point to the fact that people made them and not alien overlords, like, for some reason.
And the Moai that they found in the still in these quarries, because, like she was saying, it's a volcanic island. There's all of this material, and the stone is very soft and porous. Kind of, it's as easy to carve as soapstone, I believe, is what we were discussing last time. And anybody who's listened to the podcast in the past has heard Ken talk about his soapstone quarry and how the bowls there are made. And the Moai seem to follow a very similar process where they're carving, I believe you told me this last time, they carve the statue into the stone at the quarry, and they leave like a little pedestal on the back of the statue. So they complete the statue at the quarry, and then they chunk it out and lift it out of the quarry, and then we'll discuss later how they get the statue to where they're going to put it.
Yeah, they use the spaceships to do that.
Spaceships, yes.
Like, yeah.
With the giant claw.
There's no other way.
Claw game.
Yeah.
Picks them up and just carries them that way. I just want to see that, like it's just flying saucer with a giant claw, and it's like hovering. It's pretty awesome.
I really hope that if alien overlords, I'm actually have to bet with someone. Like at least one of the ships has to have a claw for building pyramids and Moais.
Right, because it's the only way it makes sense. It's the crane ship.
Yeah.
So we know how these are getting carved, and we know where they're getting carved from, and we have the tools that were used to carve them. But yet people are still defaulting to the concept of aliens, or the concept of the need for an advanced culture to have made these, even though we have ample evidence that that's not necessary, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of sad because I think it's part of us, like part of the population, wants a mystery. And we kind of solve it. Like, we know, for example, how the Moai moves, how they move the Moai. I know that you have seen the video in which it's called aku aku in the oral tradition, like the process in which the Moai walks. Like in the oral tradition, they would say that the Moai walk from the quarry to its haku, or platform. So at first they were saying like, dude, these guys must be like really drunk or high because there's no way that stone is going to walk.
Right.
But actually some archaeologists a few years ago did an experiment in which through ropes, they started moving the Moai from side to side, like swinging it, a standing Moai from side to side, and it would move. And they proved that, they moved it, I don't know how many 100 meters in just a few minutes. So through that, they could prove that there was a way to move the Moai that didn't involve spaceships. Like, we can do it. But still, I think that it's one of those things that I think that people want to have a mystery. Like, they don't want to let go the fact that perhaps the Moai are, like, even though, I mean, we know that they're a form of their ancestors, a representation of them. We know how they made them and how they moved them. We still don't know, like, you could have made a small statue, but you decided to make a big one. Like, I think that's one of the mysteries that we haven't solved, like the size. Why the size? Because we know that they started from small to a huge size. But still, I think it's kind of this need that people have sometimes to have mystery in their lives. Like, I'm pretty sure that perhaps it has something to do with that. Like, archaeologists are mean, and we're taking that mystery and adventure from them.
Well, I mean, we do get accused of that a lot, especially when it comes to the Moai. There's been several accusations that have been, for a long time we didn't know that some of the Moai had bodies. We thought that they were just heads. And once excavation started on the statues, they found that they were buried in the ground. And that's how we know that
I have to stop you there because the classic Rapa Nui, Easter Island picture of the Moais is, as you said, a lot of Moais on a line. And those Moais have a body. Right. Like, but the ones standing.
But there's so many of them that are buried up to their necks.
Yeah, there are more of 900 Moais on the island. A lot of them never made it out of the quarries, but still, there are like more than 300 Moais on the island, and many of them got tipped over on different political conflicts, or they get buried. And know that just before the Dutchess arrived, the island went through a lot of inner conflict. And part of that conflict was represented in the fact that a lot of obsidian tools or matas were made, which were basically weapons. And also because you start seeing more and more tipped Moais from that time. So through dating, we know that a lot of Moais that once were completely up, like full body on the surface, got or tipped over or buried. So when people say when people say that archaeologists kind of hid from them the fact that the Moais had a body, it's like, no, like look at the rest of the standing Moais on the island. Like we had archaeologists had to rebury them for respect to the Rapa Nui people. But more than that, I'm not pretty sure that there's a huge mystery there.
No, to us there's not, but to the, we as archaeologists have a really hard time communicating with people outside of our field, and this is a common theme that we hit on in our podcast as well.
Yeah.
And I think that has not helped the cause of no, we've known that the statues have bodies. How do we know, since you brought it up, how do we know through dating that the statues were tipped over? Because you can't date rock. So what are we using as a dating technique when we're looking at that? Of course, the amping up of the weapons production is a really neat kind of telltale marker there. That's a neat way of understanding that there was a conflict there. But how else are we knowing from the soils and stuff that the statues were buried at a certain point?
If I'm not mistaken, from what I remember, is that they carbon dated when they excavated around it or beneath it. They carbon dated what they find, but I'm pretty sure I could be wrong. So if anyone out there want to contradict me or tweet slap me, you can do it. It's okay. I'm probably going to be a bit rusty on.
She's taking that one on. Yeah, you just asked for a whole world of hurt there. So we're using dating techniques with the probably carbon-14 dating around the areas because there's probably plenty of things to date in the soil there. And we know it's a conflict thing, or at least it was occurring at the same time as the conflict, that the statues were getting buried. But you previously had mentioned that maybe some of these we know the statues represent ancestors, and you had previously mentioned in a conversation that we had earlier that maybe some of these statues were being purposefully buried, kind of like a retirement or a death. Is that a possibility?
I think that perhaps more than a death. I'm not pretty sure that a group of like an inner group of Rapa Nui would do that to their own statues. Like even though I believe that, I think that perhaps there are a lot of statues and a lot of years passed by, and oral tradition is not really accurate about exactly what happened. So I think that the possibility that perhaps an inner conflict between a group angry at their ancestors, it's just as possible as inter-conflict between groups. But I can imagine that in a failing ecosystem, in a very because I'm not sure if you're familiar, perhaps your listeners are familiar, but Rapa Nui ecosystem was very fragile. Like when they got there, we know through pollen columns and different type of analysis that it was a very fragile ecosystem. And by the time the Dutches arrived, like a few years before them, it was collapsing. We know that there have been a few last studies that talk about the use of different small agriculture and a few attempts to try to, I'm thinking, compensate the fact that most of the bigger flora had been completely wiped out. So
we're talking like trees and stuff.
Yes. And palms and palm trees and stuff like that could give them wood, for example, for their boats so they could fish in the open sea, and different materials. So I can imagine that a culture that it's going through all of that can have a lot of reasons to be angry at their ancestors and their neighbors' ancestors. So yeah,
right.
I think that both options are pretty plausible.
So we're thinking that when the island very first became populated, it was already experiencing a failing ecosystem when they got there?
When Rapa Nui got there?
Right. Is that what you were saying?
No. I'm saying that when they got there, it was the island, because of it is an island, it's a more fragile ecosystem.
Okay. It had a fragile ecosystem when they got there, and then, humans being humans,
Yeah.
we helped out with that. Okay.
Yeah.
We're good at that.
Actually, I think, yeah. Actually, Jared Diamond on Collapse, on his book Collapse, used Easter Island, like the collapse of the environment and basically social conflict generated by that on Easter Island as an example for what's going to happen to the rest of us, like pretty soon, I'm assuming, if climate change keeps going on.
But I can just see us taking down all of our statues then and burying them because we're angry at our ancestors. Just all of these little statues of Washington buried up to his neck. Be awesome. Anyway, send your hate mail
Just
too.
imagine it. Yeah, I just imagine it. Yeah.
Okay. So we've ruled out aliens and all that because
Have we?
it wasn't
Have
fairies.
we
so-
truly? Have we
Yeah, I'm
truly
gonna rule
ruled
out aliens. I don't know. I do like this idea of a flying saucer with a giant claw, though. I mean, that does seem to be entertaining. But there have been some accusations that the statues were not necessarily made by the culture that they're attributed to. That there was another culture that came to the island and then helped the indigenous peoples there build these statues.
Of course. Like the
to communicate with. Yeah.
The whole hyperdiffusion hypothesis to not attribute the culture that's actually there for their progress. Yeah. I know that.
Right.
It sounds familiar, like vaguely familiar.
Right. No one's ever heard this idea before. Do we have any evidence of any variety that supports the idea that a culture bearer society came over to the island and then instructed the natives there to start building these statues? Do we have any evidence that backs that kind of a claim up?
No. Thor Heyerdahl, no. Sorry. Thor Heyerdahl, on his hypothesis of the population of Polynesia, one of the things he says like 60 years ago is that, and could improve basically, was that people from the Tawantinsuyu, from the Inca Empire, had traveled to Easter Island and then to Polynesia, and that you can see the influence in different statues on the Tawantinsuyu, which is funny because the Tawantinsuyu itself didn't have that type of statue.
Right.
On Easter Island.
We're attributing traits to cultures that don't have them.
Yeah, because he was kind of saying that Tiwanaku, like he was comparing Tiwanaku statues, which are also in the Andes, to the Moai. So he kind of picked on that and said that, well, Tiwanaku influenced every single other culture after it. So it's very possible that when the Inca traveled there, they brought it with them. So it was like really far-fetched. But besides that, there's actually no evidence because up until this point, glottal chronology and DNA kind of confirms that Rapa Nui population comes from Polynesia, and that there's like this very, very precise window in between the 800s and I think 1,000 years AD, in which they could have migrated to the island. So, and after that, there's no
only
influence.
a 200-year window.
Yeah, during the last decade, there has been like perhaps way too much debate on when exactly was the island populated and which carbon dates are the earliest. There are guys that, for example, are saying that perhaps it was populated 1200 AD and not 800 AD. But it's pretty much at least DNA's analysis, and I think haplogroups analysis and glottochronology have established that it was just one migration. So if they got
nothing from the outside until the 1700s.
No, nothing from the outside. At least, and it's not also on their oral tradition. Like they don't have nothing that says that people came from the outside after they arrived.
Now, here's a question right before we go to break. because I think this is another one of those really simply answered questions. Has there ever been, even though there have been claims of these things, has there ever been a Moai statue found outside of the Easter Islands? Not transported away, but like discovered in situ outside of the islands, the Easter Island.
No, I think that one of the most that I know of, no. I know that there are some subaquatic Moai statues, like near the island. Like they took this statue to the sea. But I don't know. I'm not really sure of the context. Like I'm not sure of the interpretations of how it got there or why, which I think it's more important.
Right.
But no, there's definitely. I know that there are replicas in a lot of parts of the world. I know that you can find them in a lot of museums. But no, I haven't heard of any fringe or serious archaeological theory. I mean, I think that I'm mistaken there. I haven't seen a fringe theory about that. I'm pretty sure that there must exist somewhere.
There are.
But
there are theories among the fringe there are claims among the fringe that there are Moai statues outside of the Easter Islands, but a close examination of those claims proves that these are usually either photoshopped or a misattributed photo. And you were confirming that there is no academically known Moai statue found outside of the Easter Islands. Just ones that are apparently submerged, and we're not sure if that was a modern, like maybe the boat sank while they were taking it away to Dutchland or wherever they went after they had contact with them. So educated.
Yeah, I think that perhaps the alien claw, like God.
The alien claw just like let go at the wrong point.
It is a possibility. Like we can discard that.
I mean, that game is hard. That game's hard to win.
Yeah.
Always letting go at the wrong time.
Yeah.
We're going to go to break real quick, and when we come back, we're going to discuss, I believe, the representation of the Moai in pop culture, because there's a lot of it.
Yes.
Women in Archaeology is a show about archaeology by the women of archaeology. An alternating panel of women archaeologists discuss the issues in archaeology that impact professionals and the public every day. Check out Women in Archaeology for a different perspective on the past today at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/WIA. Now let's get back to the show.
And we are back, and we are still talking about the Easter Island statues, also known as the Moai. And Fernanda, there have been a lot of representations of the Moai statues or the Easter Island statues in just everything. Most notably, there's a lot of them in cartoons. There's a lot in the movies. I mentioned Night at the Museum. And the images of the statues themselves are so familiar that they're even used just kind of as one of those generic ancient mystery signs that are stamped on the backs of some of the fringe publishers' books as their symbols. So what really fun pop culture references do we have to these statues that we just love?
Well, I think that we've been a very lucky generation because we've been washed away by the enormous amount of reference of the Moai culture in things that have absolutely nothing to do with them. And I know that you have seen it, but there's this chapter of you have them from Gargoyles, the animated Disney series, to Johnny Quest, the comic and the series. You have them, for example, in Batman comics. There are a few more recent references, like, for example, in the series American Dad. And you have them on almost every, I don't think that every single, but in a lot of different, like, pop culture references, like from comic books to cartoons. And they are just only in the background. They are the representation of alien overlords that kind of got stuck here. So you can choose, like, from a wide variety Like if you are an overlordy fringy, you're gonna have your series. But if you're more of a I like it in the background, you can also have that. Like
I do like this link that you sent, and I'll post it in the show notes. I think it's literally an image of every single time an Easter Island head has popped up in some form of pop culture, and I mean it goes back, man. It's got Animal Crossing. I mean, that's not that old of a game, I realize, but you can get an Easter Island head in Animal Crossing. You can, of course, they were in Tomb Raider. But apparently the Super Mario Land from 1989 has little green screen Moai statues that you have to jump over.
Yeah, I
like there's
remember
this whole realm. Yeah, it's great. Super Mario Land had them. There was a whole a movie apparently written and produced called Rapa Nui in 1994, where they have some really interesting. I didn't actually watch it. Is this the Kevin Costner movie?
Yeah, it is the Kevin Costner.
No, this was directed by Kevin Reynolds. Yeah, so there you go. It's directed by Kevin Reynolds.
I think it was produced by
Kevin Costner. Yeah, this is the Costner movie. Yeah, so it is accurate and without flaw.
I must admit that I watched it like in the last 2 weeks before we started recording. I didn't watch it all. It was like homework for me. Like, okay, I'm gonna watch this. I'm gonna try to see every flaw. And after like 5 minutes, I just stopped typing. Like it was no use.
Like I'm done. It was too much.
I'm sorry.
Too much.
Yeah, it was too much for me. Because even though some scenes were definitely filmed on the island, most of the cast like didn't really have any resemblance to like. And if you see the cast on the internet, like if you type Rapa Nui movie and you try to see anyone from the cast, none of the names are Rapa Nui. Like they.
That's so common, though, to do that. You know, we're going to make this movie about indigenous peoples, but we're not going to actually use any indigenous people in the movie.
Yeah.
So it is interesting that like the poster here, the promotional poster, does show them like throwing ropes around what kind of looks like a Moai statue.
Yeah.
But they're using the log idea, like the rolling log idea that we...
Yeah. It's that
I'm pretty sure point, did not actually happen.
Up until that point, I wouldn't actually discard that, because there are a lot of archaeologists that I think that still defend that type of moving, like that way of moving the Moai. Like they say, okay, you can walk it, but you can still have rolled it. Even though they probably didn't have that many logs, they probably could have done it.
I'm not saying they couldn't have. Yeah, no, it's like you're saying. There's just the... Didn't the island suffer really bad from deforestation?
Yeah.
Due to the population on it? Yeah.
Yeah, some say partly because they needed the logs to move the Moai. I think that personally, probably the wood would have been more useful for canoes, for boats.
Yeah.
But it's But it's my interpretation. Yeah, the movie itself, I'm sorry, I couldn't really watch it at all. So I can't give a full review of it, but I can say that it's definitely not a masterpiece of Hollywood. But it's a good representation of how not to make a movie of a culture. Definitely.
Yeah, a culture that you apparently know nothing about.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting to me that there's the Godzilla versus Megalon. If Ken was here, he would correct me. So it's Godzilla versus Megalon in 1973 apparently has not only the Easter Island statues in it, but also Mu, which if we had Jeb on here, he could tell me a lot more about the connection between the mysterious island of Mu and these Easter Island statues. I may ask him about that next time I have him on the air.
Please do.
Jeb, tell me about that.
Yeah. How do you like
all about
Moai
the Easter Island statues
Mu?
on Mu? And they're everywhere. Let's see.
Yeah.
Oh, SpongeBob SquarePants has Easter Island statues in it.
Yeah, when I saw the page on the internet, when I saw that, I was like, oh my god, how could I forget? Like, of course.
Yeah.
It's in SpongeBob SquarePants.
Squidward's home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Squidward's home is a Moai head.
Yeah. One thing that I liked a lot about this is that, for example, in the page, they, for example, focus on details that I know that they were there. I know that they're like in the back of my mind. For example, that the Rongo Rongo tablet that appears on the Johnny Quest has a writing that has nothing to do with the Rongo Rongo writing. And it's kind of Chinese, I wouldn't try to... but it's definitely not Rongo Rongo. Like, perhaps if you, I don't know, were drunk and trying to represent a mix between Japanese and Rongo Rongo, you would have that, definitely.
Well, it's interesting because, like, we've discussed how the Runga Runga tablets themselves are wooden, and in the Real Adventures of Johnny Quest, Season 1, Episode 12 from 1996, for those of us who are old enough to remember that year, it says here that the tablet is metal, and there's this really cool picture of it next to the tablet, of course, being discovered by the skeleton of a Moai, which is, like, a pretty human-looking skeleton, but he's got what is basically a skeletal version of what the Moai heads look like. So he's got this giant head and this rather human-looking skeleton body. But it's interesting that even though these Runga Runga's tablets are wooden, that they decided to go with a metal tablet.
Yeah, well, alien overlords like metal, so it's okay, I guess.
Well, I mean, if you were going to create a record to last a while, you would think you would use metal, and only aliens want things to last a long time.
So, yeah.
But yeah, you brought up gargoyles.
Gargoyles.
If anybody remembers the awesome cartoon gargoyles, yeah.
Yeah, they were betrayed by the humans that they had sworn to protect. It was a very awesome cartoon.
I love how this guy looks. He looks like a shriveled raisin inside of a green suit. His name is Nakar. Yeah. Like, they even gave him a name. Like, does the name Nakar even sound like something that would come out of the Rapa Nui language?
No, not really. Like, I'm not fluent in Rapa Nui in any way, but if I know something, it says that's not Rapa Nui, like, at all.
It's interesting to me to see how the image of the statues, and I mean, most of these pop culture references, they're almost all of them are aliens of some variety. There's a couple of them on here where they're just like sleeping giants, and a couple of them where they're like stone monsters, and those are mostly the old comic books, the old Marvel and DC comics, kind of represent them as these slumbering giants that come crawling out of the ground to chase the heroes away, or what have you, in all these one-shots. But even the Choose Your Own Adventure that has the Moai statues on it, it's Inside UFO 5440, which is a Choose Your Own Adventure book, number 12, if you're looking for it.
We had those in Spanish, but we had those.
I love those. They're the best. But yeah, I mean, even those are doing the whole alien thing. So it's interesting to me that these have almost always been associated with aliens for some reason.
Yeah, I think that the fringe got hold very deeply of the Moais, partly because of an idiomatic barrier. And that idiomatic barrier had to do with the fact that while excavations were conducted here in Easter Island, they were done at the time by people who spoke Spanish and would publish in Spanish. So archaeological advances in what we knew about the culture, the Rapa Nui culture, didn't pass up until researchers that wrote in English and published in English and perhaps wrote in National Geographic magazines and could widely be distributed, be known to like the main public. Diffusion in general archaeology is a problem, and I think that the French get hold of this like really quick, like very, very rapidly. I think that the Moai itself, it's a figure that it's very easy to imitate. The outline of the face is very easy to imitate. It's very compelling. It's most of the times in the island, or in a lot of times, it's just this giant head that pops up. So yeah, if you want to let your imagination fly, you can do it like in a number of ways. There's this comic book in which the Moais are very human. Like the representation of the Moais in the comic are like very, very human-like. Like they're angry guys, like, but with different factions. I think it's a Superman comic, and and they're kind of pissed, and
Angry Moai.
yeah, angry Moais, and I think that because of people actually didn't in the rest of the world didn't know what was like truly happening with the archaeological research. It was easier for the French to take a subject and like not only the French, but like fantasy novels and comic books and whatnot, and take and manipulate it like absolutely. And it was kind of your pick up. It was kind of pick up your own story. Like it was exactly that. Like, okay, you got the Moai. Yeah. What do you want to do next? Evil overlords, ancient cures. Like you can pick.
Yeah, and like you're saying, since it's only recently that we've been, and by recently I mean the last about 50 years, that we've been getting any kind of. Unfortunately, we've finally gotten over the language barrier and are able to read the research that's being done on a wider base. That I feel like the damage has probably already been done. Like, we're always going to have these Easter Island statues, this image of the Easter Island statues, and it's always going to be, even if we can get past the weird alien stuff, it's always going to be one of those kind of tongue-in-cheek symbols from here on out, because they are so recognizable. There's nothing else really kind of like them. You know, they're still, as oddly shaped as they are, they're still compellingly human looking. And so we can still identify with them on that, like, symbolic level, I think. But at the same time, it's just interesting. Like, when you think archaeology, most people don't think the Easter Island statues. But if you're like, you know, deep, dark secrets, I feel like a lot of people's imagination just immediately goes to that, even though the Moai statues are probably one of the coolest archaeological, like, things to research in the last 100 years or better. You know, I mean, it's a neat niche. You know, they don't occur anywhere else. They're very specific to this area. They're very specific to a culture. You know, why was the culture doing this? There's a lot of answers that we don't have about this, and it doesn't come back to aliens. I mean, as much as apparently pop culture really wants that to be the answer.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't know if we'll ever get past that weird, mysterious aura that the statues have.
Yeah, I think we're way past the turning point. Like right now, if you ask, I actually believe that if you ask someone in Europe or in Asia, and you show them a picture of the Moai, they would have probably, I don't want to be cocky, but I truly believe that it's just one of those things. Like they have used it for beer commercials, for headphone commercials, they have used it for everything. So I believe that people are probably going to recognize it.
Well, and you can buy so much weird stuff that's made out of their heads. Like, I know you can buy a Kleenex box where the Kleenex comes out of the nostril of the Moai statue. So, like,
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, so like you can have that.
I have to have that. I have to have that in my house.
I will find the link for you and send it to you. But yeah, you can get.
Please.
Please let it be on Amazon. You put the box of tissues in it.
Please let it be on Amazon. Well, there's in Chile. There's actually this pisco bottle. Like pisco, it's a drink. It's kind of it's a liquor. I don't know how to explain it. It's kind of whiskey, but it's not. It's booze. It's made of grapes. It's a booze. Thank you. And you have like this very famous brand of booze called Capel, which one of the like until love, because one of the like they're huge exporters of pisco, of Chilean pisco, which is sold actually very expensively in other parts of the world, for some reason. And like the main brand that they have for exportation has a Moai bottle. Like it has, like there are no vineyards in Easter Island, but they don't give a damn. Like we can, if we
like
can
the bottle is shaped like a Moai?
Yes. And I'm going to send you
I
that
need one of
link.
these. I need one of those. I need to put it next to my Crystal Skull vodka bottle because that's where that needs to live.
Yeah.
I finally got one of those. I'm just like, oh, it's so cool. I have a Crystal Skull full of vodka. It's awesome.
Yes. Finally.
Herkimer diamonds. But so thank you very much for being on the show. But do you have any final thoughts or any points that we didn't hit that you feel like we just need to talk about before we go off air?
Well, I like to say that perhaps it's our job as archaeologists to try and keep talking about the Moais and not in an air of mystery, because that's kind of the thing that keeps feeding the fringe. And we have to remember that there's a living culture there, like living on the island, and it's part of our job. Like we not only excavate, we also have to communicate to the rest of the planet. And with the Moais, we definitely got to keep doing that. It's not aliens. Even if we want to, it's not alien spaceship with a claw. It's people, and they're alive still, and we gotta respect them. Even though the claw is cool, we gotta respect them.
Yeah. And anytime you have a living people, I mean, anytime in general, but anytime you have a living people that is still trying to, hold on to their culture because it's theirs, we need to be a little bit more sensitive about it. And I think it's important that because it's like with the whole Native American thing, a lot of people don't realize that Native Americans are still real. Like they're still people, they still exist. And I think it's the same kind of thing with the Rapi Nui. I think a lot of people, they think Easter Island, they just think these statues and these stones, and they don't realize that there's still a people living there, doing the same thing we do every day. They get up and they go to work and they come home and, they're people, they do things. But yeah, we should respect their culture. And that's a lot of why we need to kind of maybe suck some of the mystery out of these Easter Island statues.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you very much for being on the show. This has been a lot of
me.
fun, and I'm glad that you were able to give us your knowledge base on these fascinating statues.
Well, thanks a lot for inviting me. It was my pleasure.
Trials as one will call. No, we don't do dinosaurs.
Thanks for listening. We hope you've enjoyed it. Our music was provided by Archaeosuit Productions. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe and rate us on iTunes or Stitcher and share us wherever you use social media. You can contact us with your questions, comments, or angry email at archifantasies@gmail.com. You can follow the podcast at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/archifantasies. You can follow the blog at www.archifantasies.com and get updates on Tumblr and Twitter at Archaeofantasies. You can also look for us on Facebook. If you're looking for the show notes for this episode, go to the podcast website at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/archaeofantasies. Thanks again for listening.
No, we don't do dinosaurs. No, we don't do dinosaurs. We don't do dinosaurs.
This show is produced by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle.
And edited by Richie Cruz.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.